welcome to your lunar eclipse video for the Aries Lunar Eclipse in Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra. That takes place on the 28th of September 2015. The lunar eclipse will take place at 10 to 4 in the morning London time. If you reside on the east coast of the States, you can expect the lunar eclipse to take place at 10 to 11 Eastern time on the evening of the 27th. If you're on the west coast of the States, you can look for the lunar eclipse to take place at 10 to 8 Pacific time. And if you're anywhere else on the planet, well, you can go to timeanddate.com and look at it at the time in relevance to your particular location. I should mention, for those of you who are not familiar with the astronomical dynamics of what actually creates an eclipse, eclipses happen when either a new moon or a full moon takes place in close proximity to what are called the nodes, the north node and the south node. In Vedic astrology, we call these Rahu and Ketu, respectively. So a solar eclipse will take place when there's a new moon in close proximity to one of the nodes, and then the lunar eclipse will take place when there is a full moon in close proximity to one of the nodes. And eclipses always happen in pairs. There will always be one with another, and they happen every 6 months. It may seem to some people that eclipses are rare, but that's just because we don't always see an eclipse, but its effects are there, and it does happen twice a year. We're going to go a little more in depth with what the lunar eclipse itself is all about a bit later on in this video, but in order to kind of understand the energy of the eclipse in general, it's important to take a look at the build-up to that particular eclipse. And I tend to call the period in between a solar and lunar eclipse the eclipse portal. And during that particular time, it's a very powerful time for transformation if you understand the areas of your chart that are being impacted by the eclipse. You should see at various points of this video a link to my astrological services page if you would like to know the impact of the eclipse personally on your particular astrology. But let's talk about this energy that is building up to the eclipse. Sometimes it's very good to have an equal balance between strength of will, strength of drive, passion to try to get the job done, a strong desire to exercise one's will to make something happen, and an equal balance on the other side of awareness and patience. And there is a particular tone to this specific eclipse cycle, which is saying that exact thing, right? You need to have the strength to get things done. You need to have the drive to make it happen. You need to have the passion to fuel that drive. All of those things are very necessary. But if you're stuck on where you're going and how you're getting there, well, that's going to be a little bit of a different story, right? And quite often that is the problem that we have. We get so attached to how we achieve our goals or the way that it's going to happen because we like to naturally see our egos gratified, right? And the thing is people like give the concept of ego such a hard time. But really, on a certain level, we need a certain level of ego in order to maintain our individuality, in order to go through our experience of consciousness. Otherwise, the things that we go through, especially when we get hit with some pretty heavy events, if we didn't have a strong sense of self, well, then we'd really get knocked off of our center and things could feel a little bit imbalanced, right? So that level of ego is there until it's ready to disappear naturally. And it's there almost like a protective layer to protect us while we're here incarnated and going through this particular experience of consciousness. So let's take a look at some of the aspects that are building up to the lunar eclipse of the 28th. And we're going to start with the 23rd of September. Venus, now moving forward in Leo, is going to form a harmonious angle with Uranus over here in Aries. This is an angle of 120 degrees, right? Most people who are familiar with Vedic astrology just know of the normal aspects that go on between the planets, but things like the trine and the square, they are also used in the Vedic system of astrology, and they're called the Tajika aspects, right? So we're taking a look at what is called the Tajika aspects, which is what most people who are familiar with Western astrology know. Venus is in Magha Nakshatra, okay? And with Magha Nakshatra, there's very much the concept of having a strong sense of self. Magha is symbolized by a palanquin. Some of you may not know what that is, but if you look at pictures from medieval times or pictures from ancient India, you'll see royalty being carried through the towns and the cities in like this little carriage, either on the shoulder of their servants or on the back of an elephant. And that encasement that carries the nobility through the village, that is what is called the palanquin, right? So basically, the concept is similar for the soul and for the nobility of the soul. It's wrapped here while we're incarnated in an encasement, our body, all the various sheaths that, encase our soul. That's part of our natural palanquin. And it's important that we have that. And that's one of the things that's related to Magha Nakshatra, because Magha Nakshatra is part of the second third of the nakshatras, and those nakshatras are tamasic at their basis. Tamasic energy is very dense, very hard-shelled, and it represents the concept within the second tier of nakshatras. The second tier of nakshatras represent the point in the evolutionary journey where the soul is becoming encased in physical form. And that's the point of what is going on in Magha Nakshatra. So there's a balancing point there. The soul is here in physical form. The soul is also aware of its strength of spirit, right? And it's also aware of where it's come from. And it's also aware of the desire that it wants to get back there, but it has to go through all these particular experiences, right? So what does that have to do with the matter at hand? Absolutely nothing. I've just gone off on a tangent for no particular reason whatsoever. No, I'm only kidding. There's a harmonious angle happening between Venus and Uranus. And Uranus is in Revati Nakshatra. Revati marks the end of the evolutionary cycle, before the soul is returning to spirit, while it's preparing for its next lifetime, if it's going to have a next lifetime. And what happens in Revati Nakshatra are preparations for the next stage of the journey. There are a lot of things that are being developed, but they haven't quite come into being yet, right? So basically, with this Venus-Uranus trine, there's a strong sense of self, and there's a strong sense of wanting to apply oneself in a particular direction, right? And wanting to create a result. But there's also the awareness that things are needing to happen at a certain pace. And that pace may not match with where the soul is, or what the soul is wanting to do, or what you as an individual is wanting to do. So there's a need to have the balance point with the strength of your drive and with wisdom, because Venus is about refining things. With wisdom and with refining things, then you can achieve quite a lot, and you can begin to set some things in motion for the next phase of your journey, right? But if you let things get a little too out of hand and think of yourself purely as the doer, well, then things are likely going to get a little bit imbalanced, and you're going to be hit with some unexpected results, regardless of whether it's a trine or not. Trines basically just mean that two planets are working in harmony to create change. And that's the cycle that's happening in this particular event, right? So Venus, within the position that it's in Magha Nakshatra, it does have the potential to analyze the situation, refine things a little bit more, and also look at the fact that it's doing something for a greater cause. It's doing something for a greater cause and sacrificing itself to that cause. With that particular attitude, things are really going to be set in motion quite appropriately. On the very same day, You can see that the sun here is in the latter portions of the sign of Virgo. Over the course of the 23rd, it's going to shift into Libra as it's heading up to the lunar eclipse, which, just a reminder, the lunar eclipse happens on a full moon. And the moon will be in Aries, the sun will be in Libra, right? Libra is the balance point. Libra is also the area of the zodiac where the sun is debilitated. Why is that? Okay, well, Aries is the natural east. Libra is the natural west. So basically the sun in Aries is the sun at its rise. The sun in Libra is the sun as it's setting. Also, in terms of the evolutionary journey represented by the zodiac, and this is by no means a judgment on you Libras, so I don't want to get like tons of emails from Librans, going, oh, well, why are you dissing me here? But because I'm not. Okay, it's just understanding the evolutionary journey. When the sun is entering Libra, it marks the point of the evolutionary journey where the soul is in its densest form in its material encasement. It's here in matter. It's dealing with world-based justice, earth-based justice, right? Natural balance of things here on Earth. That's what the scales are all about, the natural balance of things here on Earth, right? So as the sun is entering Libra, over the course of the same day, it's going to form a harmonious angle with Saturn. And the sun is going to be shifting from Uttara Nakshatra into Hasta Nakshatra. And Hasta is about breathing life into something. It's actually associated with a particular aspect of the sun called Savitar. Savitar is the name of the sun that breathes life into things. Why is it breathing life into things? Well, because it wants to create a change. It wants to free itself from one set of circumstances and move into a different phase. So it's hoping to create a change or manifest a change. That's what Hasta Nakshatra is all about, is manifestation. But manifestation for the process of liberating one from a particular set of circumstances. And as the sun is doing that, things are going to be balancing out. There's going to be some need to look at some of the aspects of where you were hoping to head and looking at some of the aspects of where you feel things are developing and finding the balance point between the two. Saturn is in Anuradha Nakshatra. In Anuradha Nakshatra, one of the things that it is very deeply about is the concept of right relationship. Anuradha is associated with Radha. Radha was the perfect devotee of Krishna, who had complete devotion to Lord Krishna, but felt a sense of separation from him, when in actuality she was always at one with Krishna. Also, Anuradha is connected to Mitra, the god of friendship. So the concept here is how to have the right relationship with something, because Anuradha is a Dharma-driven nakshatra. So wanting to do the right thing as one is creating a foundation for a change, right? Wanting to do the right thing to shift oneself from one phase of existence into another, and letting things balance out as one is really trying to bring into being that next phase. On the following day, we need to make a shift of our astrological calendar here of about a day. And after we've done that, we will bring our good old friend, the magnifying glass, back up again. And we may just keep it here from now on, because when we move that astrological clock forward too much, it makes the video a little bit shaky. So on the 24th, this is going to be happening for a while. We just had a tense aspect between Mercury and Pluto recently. And we're having another square between Mercury and Pluto. Why is this happening? Well, it's happening because Mercury is now retrograde. And then when Mercury goes back direct, it'll square Pluto once more. So let's talk a little bit about this particular aspect. Mercury, as Mercury is in Hasta Nakshatra along with the sun, there's a feeling of looking at all the difficulties, at all the resistance that one is encountering, reflecting upon that, really integrating the reasons that one is encountering all those difficulties. But by the same token, Pluto, who is in Purva Ashadha nakshatra, is really strongly wanting a shift. I was trying to think of the right way to phrase that. Wanting a shift forward based upon the truth that one is feeling in one's heart. But by the same token, if one is to create that shift in the way that one is desiring to create that shift within one's heart, there are going to have to be some adjustments, and there are likely going to have to be some sacrifices. It's not going to be that one can have it completely one's way, right? Sometimes we can get into these positions where we go, well, you know, it's my way or the highway, and we might feel like, well, that's really good because I stuck by myself and I stuck by my heart. And yes, on one level you did, but on another level, how much was that experience really worth to you? And by no means am I, you know, suggesting that you take a superficial approach, or am I suggesting that you don't follow your heart. But what I am suggesting is looking at where you might be a little bit dogmatic in this approach, looking at where you might think you're coming from your heart, and in all actuality, you're coming from the ego, or you're coming from the head. Because one of the things that Purva Ashadha and additionally Pluto are going to do is to get rid of that ego. It's going to wear it down until you understand what is really right for you, who you really are, beyond any particular conception of what all of those particular things are, right? And that's what this Mercury-Pluto square is all about. So there's a very deep process that's happening over the course of the week. And as that happens, Pluto is slowing down and getting ready to station before it moves to direct motion, where it will be in direct motion until April of 2016. More on that in a moment. But let's talk about the fact that basically on the 25th, a day later, we're going to have Mars, who is in Leo up until this point. Mars is going to shift down into Virgo. Mars in Virgo can be very particular energy. I just want to say that, right? It wants things a certain way, and it wants things a certain way for a reason, and it's got a very logical idea of why it wants things those way, and it's going to put its passion and its strength of will behind things to make sure that those things happen in that particular manner. But is that the best approach? No. Is it a good thing to have? Well, on one level, yes, because you're looking to have that balance become established. And as that balance is becoming established, that's what's actually going to create the shift. So there's a process that's going on two different levels. You're creating a change, and also by the same token, you're going through a transformation or a shift in relation to the ego. And both of those things are equally important to the process as we're heading up to the lunar eclipse. If there's been any choppiness in the video, I apologize for that. The software seems to be acting up here. But let's just keep things moving forward. So Mars enters Virgo. And then on that very same day, Pluto is going to station to direct motion, where it will be direct until the 18th of April. When Pluto's retrograde, it's about, on many levels, being honest with ourselves, right? And then when Pluto goes towards direct motion, and this is just a brief generalization of what the retrogradation and direct energy of Pluto can be all about, because there are several different aspects of that. But in relation to our particular cycle, as Pluto stations and then goes direct, it's about pruning away all of those things that don't fit in with the reality of who you are, with the reality of what you are, and with the reality of where you need to go, in contrast to perhaps where you might want to go. So we can look at the next 6 months as being somewhat related to this. And it's very powerful to have a Pluto station in connection with an eclipse cycle, because that means that the next 6 months, as eclipses happen every 6 months, so the next 6 months before the next eclipse cycle are going to be very powerful, and there's going to be some very strong changes in your life. So Pluto stations direct on the 25th. Then on the 26th, we have Mars, which will be in Virgo, forming a tense alignment with Saturn in Anuradha Nakshatra. Mars will be in Magha. And with Mars in Magha, there's a concept here. Let's talk a little bit more deeply about Magha Nakshatra, because each of the nakshatras has a particular Shakti, or energy tone, to which it is related. And with Magha Nakshatra, that Shakti is the power to leave the body. Now, there are several different meanings of that, but important to the energy of the week is the concept of when we're dealing with things that don't necessarily feel pleasant to us, but ultimately we know are right for us, then it's good to have the feeling that one can leave the body. And it doesn't mean journey outside of the body. It just means putting your own, well, for lack of a better way to put it, pardon the analogy, selfish concerns behind you. Putting those selfish concerns to one side because you know there is something that you need to do for the better. And that's very much the energy that Mars is going to be dealing with in relation to Saturn, as Saturn will be in Anuradha Nakshatra. There are several different charts in Vedic astrology. One of those charts is the Navamsha chart. And that kind of shows the inner workings of what's going on with the particular planets. It's much more than that, but that's one aspect of it, just to kind of touch on it for the purpose of this video. And in the Navamsha chart, it's interesting because Saturn will be in Aries, where it's debilitated, and Mars will be in Capricorn, where it's exalted. So there's a very strong interchange of energy that's going on between those particular planets. So Saturn in Anuradha, well, one might want to do a certain set of things, but it's actually more right and appropriate that one restrains oneself. Saturn doesn't like being in Aries because Aries is going to create an impulsiveness, and Saturn's going to be somewhat reserved by that. So there's a need to kind of find the balance between those two things and, in true Anuradha fashion, create the proper relationship with the situation that you're dealing with. Mars will be in Capricorn. Now, Mars in Capricorn is exalted, and Mars can get the job done when it deals with Capricornian energy. So if you look at the concept that you might not be able to do things in the way that you want to do them, but you can definitely make some progress in the right direction by putting your own selfish sensibility or lack of sensibility aside, then a lot of great change can really happen with this particular alignment. Even though squares are tense alignments, they tend to create harmony upon their resolution. So they're tense energy that creates a positive resolution. Then on the 28th, the moment that we've been talking about and the whole purpose for this video is the lunar eclipse in Aries. From what I understand, this will be a supermoon lunar eclipse. Supermoons are when the moon is really close to the Earth. So it's going to be a very powerfully felt lunar eclipse, and it'll take place in Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra. Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra, in no uncertain terms, deals with the ego, whether the ego wants to be dealt with or not. What Uttara Bhadrapada is going to show us is where we've been ignorant, where perhaps we thought that things were a certain way, but we're kind of stuck in a particular dogma or a certain way of looking at things, and where we need some change, and we need perhaps even to have our paradigm shattered so that we can make the proper shift. Well, Uttara Bhadrapada is going to reveal that information to us and let us see the true nature of the situation. It's going to let us see things beyond our ideas or concepts. And on the more microcosmic level, well, that can mean thinking that things are a certain way, but having it revealed to you that a different direction would actually be more appropriate, right? So also this energy is going to be very determined. There are two different sides of determination, and this is why we've been talking about this the whole time. So there's the determination that keeps its awareness and is willing to change and really just wants to do the right thing. And then there's determination that goes, well, this is what I want, and this is how I'm going to make it happen. And it's that second type of determination that's really just going to kind of make you hit a brick wall and reveal some things to you that you might not want to see, right? So make it easier on yourself with this particular eclipse cycle. Be aware of the changes and transformations that might need to happen. Make willing sacrifices as the process evolves. You'll be glad in the end that you did. That's how you can make the best use of this particular eclipse cycle as we're heading up to the lunar eclipse. And again, such a powerful eclipse cycle because Pluto is going to be stationing and it's going to be moving direct. And it'll be direct all the way up until April, as we're going to, and that will be near the next, or it should be a little bit before, but it will be in close proximity, right? Because the next eclipses will be taking place with the nodes in Pisces. You can look for a correction at the bottom of this video. I don't have time to look at it within the scope of this video, but I'll put the exact date in the annotation at the bottom part of this video. But Pluto will be retrograde, I should say direct rather, until the 18th of April 2016, which will be close to the next eclipse cycle. So Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto kind of function like Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma is the creative energy. That's related to Uranus. Uranus shakes things up and creates new forms, right? Neptune is related to Vishnu. Vishnu had several different incarnations, but underneath all those different incarnations, it was always Vishnu. So one of the things Neptune is about is the changing of forms, but what is the essence behind those forms? And Pluto is Shiva. Shiva is the destroyer. Shiva destroys those things that are old and are no longer needed so new developments can take place. One of the things that always needs to be destroyed is the ego. And when the ego is blocking us from a particular development. And again, going back to the beginning of this video, sure, a certain level of ego is necessary. We need that individuality. We need that strong sense of self in order to go through this experience of consciousness. But we also need the willingness to prune away those things that aren't working, those concepts about self that aren't right, those feelings about our path that aren't right, those selfish desires of what we want need to be pruned away in favor of those things which are ultimately better for us. And if you make use of this particular lunar eclipse to do just that, it's going to place you in good position over the course of the next several months. If you'd like a little bit more information on how this particular eclipse cycle might be impacting you personally, again, I will mention that I do offer several different tiers of astrological service that are available through my astrological services page. There should be a link to that page in the lower left-hand corner of this video. That's going to do it for your lunar eclipse video for the lunar eclipse in Aries of the 28th of September 2015. Please take the very best care of yourself. Bye now.